There is something I have been meaning to ask you.
Well, what is it, Bart?
Well, I heard you debating theology on the phone last night. So, I gotta ask. How can you be an empiricist and such a dogmatic Christian? It seems a little inconsistent.
That is funny you should say that. I was just about to ask you how you reconcile your empiricism with your atheism. I cannot conceive how that would work. It seems rather absurd.
Absurd? This coming from the guy who believes in an invisible sky being. How can you possibly know of an insensible God by sensation? See my point? Look. I had you move in with me because we both seemed to be dedicated empiricists, but you can't keep being so dogmatic if you don't first justify your views by empiricism.
Well, I am more than willing to debate my views. But just so you know, I believe this is a metaphysical issue. I believe Christianity metaphysically justifies empiricism.
It already sounds like you are putting the cart before the horse.
Let's not quibble on the question of metaphysical or epistemological priority. Let us, rather, begin with defining our terms.
Fair enough. Do you believe all knowledge begins at the level of percepts?
Yes. Of course. But how would you define a percept?
A percept is an immediate object of experience which is made up of sensations. And sensations are the irreducible constituents of a percept, defined best as raw feels.
I could not have said it better myself. But before we continue, I need to have some things clarified about your views.
Like what?
Well, you already know that I am a Christian of the Reformed or Calvinistic persuasion. But atheism is far too ambiguous. So, would you consider yourself a materialist?
Of course. In the Marxist sense.
You know that is not what I meant.
Indeed. But the term is rather antiquated. I prefer physicalist. I am also a naturalist. I deny any supernatural explanation as unnecessary and assert reality to be causally closed.
Nonetheless, you would still define reality as being exhaustively explainable in terms of physical or material causation.
That is correct. Now, since we are on the topic of metaphysical suppositions, how would you define your God?
God is a spirit or mind, invisible, infinite, eternal, and unchangeable. He is one God in Trinity, and Trinity in unity. He is the primary cause of all reality as it comes to pass.
Invisible? That word epitomizes my entire problem with your view. How can you, as an empiricist, believe in such a God?
I never claimed to perceive God directly, nor does any Orthodox Christian. You are attacking a false caricature of my views. I know of God by his sensible works and word, but let me ask you something. You admitted that matter is the cause of all things, did you not?
More or less. I would prefer to say that I believe in a causally closed physical reality.
That is not a very good explanation of physical or material causation. But for now, let us go back to discussing perceptual experience and the nature of the perceiving agent.
I can address all of those topics and complaints at once. Physical reality is a collection of percepts, and percepts are objects of experience or consciousness.
So then, would you define consciousness as the mind?
I have no problem defining the mind as consciousness.
So, since you stated that percepts are objects of consciousness, you would agree with my preferred language of stating that percepts exist in consciousness?
So long as you do not define in a grossly literal way.
Of course not. I am no solipsist. However, I must ask, where did the percepts that exist in your mind originate?
The percepts were caused to exist in my mind or brain from the interaction of my sense organs with the physical world.
Your brain? The physical world? Are not brains part of the physical world? And did you not say that the physical world was perceptual? And that things perceptual exist in the mind? How can the physical world, which is itself perceptual, cause the perceptual world as it exists in your mind? How can the former be perceptual if it does not exist in consciousness? Likewise, if brains are percepts, and percepts exist in the mind, and brains are the mind, would that not mean that the brain exists in the brain? Is this not a circular argument?
Are you done blabbing? I was merely careless with terms. The physical world in our conscious experience is distinct from the physical world that causes it. The physical world that exists in our mind is perceptual or mental. The physical world that causes it is not.
So, would you say that the irreducible constituents of this mind-independent physical reality are known most accurately as matter? Would percepts originate from material cause?
Yes. That would be correct.
So then, just to be clear, matter is mind-independent by definition, and percepts are mind-dependent.
That seems correct to me. So let me ask you the same thing. Where do your percepts come from? My answer is simply matter. I have no need for God. How can you justify his addition? Even if you can justify such an addition, how is that not a more complicated explanation for the source of percepts? My system seems to be undeniably favored by Occam's razor.
Percepts as mental content can only exist in a mind. If a percept comes into existence in my mind, it must have come from somewhere. Something cannot come from nothing. Since percepts can only exist in a mind, they could only have existed in another mind. This other mind, being the source of all percepts, is a supreme mind called God. So, percepts originate in my mind from God. I have no need for matter, nor could matter be the source of my percepts, since matter is not itself a mind. And percepts exist in minds. To be frank, my system, and not yours, is simpler. I only have minds and percepts. God, men, and angels are minds. The physical world is made of percepts. You, on the other hand, hold to minds, percepts, and a third category called matter. Though, by denying God your system has less minds, you still have more ontological types, since my system is ontologically simpler by Occam's razor. The burden of proof is on you to prove the existence of matter. Likewise, you must show how it can give percepts.